What's up guys, this is Gabe/Kev69 back at another crappy video. We're going to be talking about the macros and how we write things. So first, and we're doing this in ultra just because there's so much shit that's going to be on the screen, you have to jump through all of it and you can't even see anything because the text is so small. So first we just want to talk about the history of the macro writing. Like obviously vanilla, so 1.12, the original WoW had unlocked Lua to begin with. You could run CastSpellByName like with the stock client. So it's the most powerful, and everything that you write works, and you can do crazy shit and it always works and the code always runs. So 1.12 vanilla was the best for writing crazy macros. In TBC, you lost. That's when they locked it, so you could no longer do it. So you have to use a Lua unlocker to be able to run shit like CastSpellByName. So first you have to, in TBC you had to unlock the Lua. And then I couldn't find a macro, super macro add-on. So like typically you're limited in here to 255 characters, which is like, maybe I'll just turn the music off because we're talking so much, it's not really gameplay. You're limited to 255 characters, which is fuck all when you're trying to write crazy macros. So there's a macro for vanilla called super macro, which is kind of similar, and it just lets you write really long macros. And super macro also had inbuilt code which it hides code in a function, so you don't have to write all this bullshit code, because when we get to how you have to do it in RAF, you'll see there's some ugly code that you have to write. Like, so this hideous shit, if we go back here so you can actually read it, this here is a while loop, a disgusting loop just to cycle through all the debuffs. It's ugly as sin and it's hard to read, right? But in vanilla, so 1.12, super macro has a function called buffed. So you just go, you run a function called buffed, and it does this code so you don't have to write it, and it's not as ugly, and it takes less space, and then you have more space to write crazy macros. But from TBC onwards, I couldn't find something with that code. And another thing is, like, obviously I have a degree in software engineering, yada yada yada, but I'm lazy as shit, right? Like, I don't claim to say that this is the best way to do it. And there's two issues, like, obviously how much effort you're going to put into it to make it work quickly, yada yada. You can write all sorts of crazy shit, but does it fit in the macro? And then outside of 1.12 vanilla, macros just break. Like, even though you think you could write it prettier or better, it just breaks and stops working completely. So sometimes it's ugly as sin just because it only works like that. And then if anyone remembers from TBC, I said things like, if macros got too long or had too many CastSpellByNames, the whole thing just stops working completely and you have to split it into two different macros. So it's not as simple as writing the best theoretical code and it just works. Sometimes you just have to do hacky shit because the game just doesn't work. The macro just stops working. It's only vanilla 1.12 where you could run crazy macros and they always work. From TBC onwards, they stop working. So there's that. So we talked about length of the macros, super macro. TBC, I used this thing called bindpad because I couldn't find super macro. This is Wrath, so I could find super macro. That just lets you write longer macros. And so there's the macros themselves, which are keyed to buttons, but then you use your multibox client, so you could use inner space ISBoxer, but I just use hotkey net because ISBoxer is very good and powerful, but it's kind of clunky to set up. And it's like do you want to spend 18 hours autistically setting up all this crazy shit, or do you just want to set up what you need? So ISBoxer is good, but it's clunky, right? Whereas HotkeyNet is very simple and plain. But if you don't know what you're doing, it's hard to use. So for HotkeyNet, you have a config for HotkeyNet. So HotkeyNet is the thing that sends the keys to the clients. So we have lots of clients open off screen. And HotkeyNet is the thing that tells when you press keys, which windows they go to. So you can configure crazy shit. And we actually need to write a table of contents for this, because this is pretty ugly to read. So we'll get through. I don't know if we'll put this in a different video, because this is personal preference, not necessarily like everyone. Like the most important thing are the macros, not like how you press the keys. But so you've got the macros, which is what the game does, and obviously you need unlock Lua for it to work. And then you have however you send the keys to the client. So there's two things going on. So that's like that. So we'll start talking about the bare macros. And obviously we drive from the tank because it's just easier. Because the tank's got to like look at where the threat is. Everyone else is just DPSing or healing. So we'll start with the first bare macro. Now we need to get this back on the screen. And get this back on the screen. Maybe we'll start here. We have two simple because some of the macros you don't need. It's just whenever you send a key. So we have like panic button macros, just cast 2 spells. These are all just tests, and then these are the super macros. So DPS 1, which we just copied here. So this first bit of code, this part here is just a while loop going through all your debuffs of your target. Hey, this is actually broken. This is actually broken. This is actually broken because it's got it's got this thing here. Did it work? I have to go check if it actually worked. We don't actually want that. Or did we fat finger something? This is a while loop which goes through your target's debuffs and looks for a string which you specify. So faerie fire. And then if it finds it, you don't need to do anything, then do nothing. Obviously, if you don't know anything about programming, you're going to get lost here. But coding this isn't going to be about like how to code. If you want to know what an if-else loop, just fucking Google coding. Or just copy-paste, right? And obviously, we've only just done these macros quickly now. So these aren't like, I don't claim that these are like the best you can write or whatever. Again, it's how much effort you want to put into it to get it working. It might not actually work. Remember when macros just break if you write them in a certain way, too many casts. So even if there's a better way, it might not work. And then you can do way crazier shit where you write addons. Like I don't bother with writing addons to write functions. Like you can put stuff in functions, yada yada yada. Here's the text box, fucking write the macro. They're like, that's all I'm doing, right? So there's many things you can do better. But so you have this giant ugly while loop, which is just going through each debuff on the target, and then it looks for string find, faerie fire. So it's looking for a specific debuff, if it does find it, this is ugly ifs, but whatever. And some of this is copy pasted from other people's code. Then if it does exist, you don't need to do anything. It already has the buff. If it doesn't have the buff, then you want to cast the spell to do the buff. And this C is a shorthand because some of this is like from way back in the day where you'd run out of space in your macros. So C equals this is just a... so you don't have to write this whole thing out. So when you had macros where you had so many cast spell by names that you needed to save the space, like you would do C so that you don't have to write that many characters and you'd run out of space. It's a kind of a convoluted thing, like, but it's not that important. But yeah, so yeah, cast the buff. So it's not that complicated, right? Look for the buff. If it has it, do nothing. Otherwise, cast the buff. And then you have it again for demoralizing roar. Obviously, the tank is the bear, so he's gonna prio these buffs. Start attack to start swinging. Here you can do crazier shit, but it might not be necessary, so you can put casting rage to just spam it. Sometimes skills break when you have too many of these. And then the main DPS, if Mangle's off cooldown, cast Mangle. Otherwise, if you've got more than this mana, do Maul. And then if your rage is getting really high, dump it with Swipe, because this is a single target. And then we have the exact same button on a different key, but this is our Lacerate. Because this is not vanilla, so you can't just write crazy if-then with Lacerate. So it's easier to just have two separate keys. So one key is applying Lacerate, and once Lacerate's 5 stacks, you swap to your main key. You can write like a crazy if Lacerate is already up, then swap to your thing. But in TPC and onwards, you can't do crazy long macros without it breaking. So I just put Lacerate on a different key, and then you swap to the first key. And it's just easier. So it's again like you can do crazier shit, but like you need to put more effort into it. And it's just easier to do this. It's this exact same thing. This is our pre-combat heal over time setup for Bear, which I find is really cool. We put again a big loop checking for Thorns buff. And you do the clear casting, but obviously you don't have the talents. You don't have the talents to get this yet. Omen of Clarity. Cast Thorns if you don't have it. And then the next one is Regrowth and Rejuvenation. And we added Bark Skin. Hey, this is actually, we didn't finish writing it. This is supposed to be... Oh no, yeah. If you don't have Rejuvenation, cast it, otherwise cast Bark Skin. So this is your pre-combat, so target self does regrowth, rejuve, and Bark Skin. Bark Skin is so short that it usually wears off before combat even starts. So that's like your pre-combat macro. Taunt, we just have cast Growl, it's not a big deal. AoE Taunt, these are all pretty simple. We have Berserk on another key just because, again, too many casts in one macro just breaks macros. And Charge. So Charge is, if you're not in Bear, and Rage and Charge. This is just checking debuffs for testing. So that's the Bear. It's really not that complicated. And then we put just keys down here. So then we'll move on to next character, the Rogue. the main rogue macro. Some of this is just test code. So assist to get the same target as the tank. Because in Wrath you have the debuff when you come out of stealth. We have no combat stealth, so if you're not in combat, go into stealth, and then he walks over and then he gets out of combat. And then the main DPS combo points. So if you've got more than 4 combo points, do Envenom. Otherwise, if you have no combat points, cast Mutilate. So again, the macro is simpler in Wrath. There's no, because you don't use backstab, but we should probably check if backstab is actually better damage, because you can do backstab detection. Here is a loop to get your buffs. If you don't have Slice and Dice, then cast Slice and Dice, obviously, and that gets refreshed eventually when you have the talents. Start attack, and then your main fucking attack is just Mutilate, right? Not that huge. We added, and our second key is this, because again, too much shit in one macro breaks. So the multi-box thing is sending DPS and this key, which we set to F, I think. Why is that not on the screen? Action bars. Yeah, it's off the screen. So that spams your DPS key and F to do this, and this is just fuck. Just some stupid shit we added in. The Hunger for Blood thing, which only works if there's a debuff. So you have to check if it's got a bleed on it. Or you do it the other way. You just, because sometimes if things fail, it just breaks entire macros. So you put it in a separate macro, so that if it breaks the macro, it's not breaking your main DPS macro. Again, this is a thing where like stuff just breaks and stops working, because you're not supposed to be able to do this. But so this is just, if you don't have Hunger for Blood, try to cast it, and it's in a different macro so it doesn't break the rest. And then here we just added this stupid cast Cold Blood if you've got 4 combo points or more, because you're about to do a max rank Envenom or whatever, and also spam your Blood Fury. And then here we added a pre-combat Tricks of the Trade, so target the tank, cast Tricks of the Trade. But again, it usually wears off before combat even starts, right? It's like you gotta do it, because you're not doing everything at the same time. So that's a tough one, because you're doing the tank's pre-combat thing, the heals, and then you got to do this, which is just an extra step. Like obviously it just gets more complicated when you add more shit. It just gets more complicated. And obviously we have a follow button, so this here is when we Alt F is our follow. So if we go back over here to our multi-boxing program, Alt F sends period to each thing. Period is just the follow macro, so when you press follow, everyone follows. So that's the rogue at the moment. Obviously this is Wrath and we've never played it, so we just came up with quickly what we think's working, and it seems to work fine. Moving on to the Fury. Which keys are we even using? DPS 1. Assist, get a target, start swinging. This is just a bit of fluff. Obviously this is Wrath, so you can't write as crazy macros as things. So we just put to charge if you can. So if you're not in combat, battle stance, charge. If you got more than 70 thing, dump, heroic strike. If the target's below 20%, you can execute. So this is an if statement. And then the main attack, if Bloodthirst is off cooldown, Bloodthirst, otherwise Whirlwind. It's a Fury DPS, so it's not as complicated as the vanilla tank macros where you could do crazy shit. Then again, we have a Sunder key. So we set the same with the Lacerate. It's just easier because again, this is Wrath, not vanilla, so we just put Sunder on a different button, so 2 is Lacerate and Sunder, and then we just manually look at the stacks, because stacking buffs is even more of a pain in the ass to check with Lure than normal buffs, and it's not that easy, and it just breaks macros. So it's easier to just look at the thing whether you need to keep doing it or not, then check for stacking buffs. It's actually quite difficult. So that's just dump heroic and cast Sunder. Then we have a slam, and this gets spammed with, so every time you do DPS keys, it's doing F. So this is check for the slam buff, which does the instant slam. If you've got the buff, do a slam. This is a battle shout, so if you don't have battle shout, keep refreshing it, and then make sure you're in the right stance. And then this is just easier to just spam these two, and it still works. So your cooldowns. Then we have the pre-combat shout, just to make sure it's there. Wreck. This is just on a DPS key, which is for us Shift Q. Charge, same thing with the bear, make sure you're in the right stance and then charge. And then the AoE is just the same thing. Get the target, dump to cleave, and instead of Bloodthirst first, you prio Whirlwind, so it's quite simple. And then he has the same macros like follow. So that's the Fury Warrior. We'll just do the DK as well. So we've never played a DK, so we don't know if this is optimal. We'll just figure it out as we go. But obviously the DK stuff just breaks macros, because it's got all these procs that you gotta look for. We're just gonna move this over here so we can see our keys. So we start with DPS 1, because you have to split it up into 5 different macros, because they all break each other. So we start with DPS 1. So DPS 1, first thing is check for Horn of Winter. So a while loop, checking for debuffs. If you don't have it, cast Horn of Winter. Second, checking for Unbreakable Armor. If you don't have it, cast it. And we just chucked start attack in there. Then the next step, KS, Killing Spree. Oh fuck. So we put the procs in a different macro, because if you put too much in one macro in TBC or newer, it just breaks the whole thing. So the multi-box clients, when you send DPS keys, for the DK specifically, it's cycling keys. So it presses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. depending on if it's AoE or DPS. So it runs the DPS macro, then it runs the first proc. So killing spree, check for the killing machine buff. If you have it, use frost strike. We put a print because we were testing stuff. We can delete that. Do frost strike if you have that. So that's KS. Same thing for rhyme. If you have rhyme, do howling blast. KS, rhyme, debuff. What's debuff? Debuff is your 2 damage over times. So instead of unit buff, it's unit debuff. Check for frost fever. If it doesn't have it, do icy touch. Otherwise not. Second one, if you don't have blood plague, do plague strike. Otherwise do nothing. And we have oblit. Now this was just, we're still testing because we don't fully understand how the class works and if you need to manage rune cooldowns. So we just chuck blood fury and obliterate in here. And then KS Howl was when you're doing AoE, when you have killing spree, you're supposed to do howling blast instead. So that's check for debuff and then cast howling blast. So obviously the class is a bit complicated, but we're pretty sure this is all the thing. And then cast Army of the Dead is like a cooldowns. We don't actually know some of the abilities. I don't understand how to use blood tap because you're always limited by some other rune, so this doesn't actually do anything. I don't know. We're not 100% on how this class works and the rotation, so that's what we've come up so far. So then finally the healer, and this is like the most important fancy macro. So what we do, again, in vanilla you could just write the whole thing in one macro. And if anyone remembers, like, because we were using our laptop, like, which was barely running all the clients, and the macro was so long that when you're just spamming the key, the macro wouldn't finish by the time you press the key, and it would just cause deadlock, and it would just fuck the computer. So we had to reduce the rate at which it would send keys to the healer because the macro was so long it didn't finish before you tried to run it again, and the whole client would just lock up. That was kind of funny. But yeah, so what we do for the healer is we cycle. We have a key for each person you want to check for healing. Like obviously in vanilla 1.12 you could do the whole thing in one macro, but here we split it characters into each key. So the multi-box client is sending 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 to the priest every time you press your DPS keys. So on one you're targeting the tank, large gay bear, and you're checking, does he have Sacred Shield? Because that's a paladin specific thing. Obviously we're talking specifically about our characters. Give him Sacred Shield if he doesn't have it. Otherwise, if his health is, you have to do this calculation. Actually, I don't remember. Maybe you don't have to anymore. But it's easier to convert it to a percentage. So this is a calculation to convert it to a percentage. If less than 80%, cast Holy Light. I found, we don't even know how hpally works, but hpally doesn't have like complicated healing, so there's not much for it to do, so we haven't really added much. So target the tank. If he doesn't have the buff, give it to him. If his health is below 80, heal him. Pretty simple, right? Then go to the next character. We haven't macroed the hpally can like set a second target so that whenever you heal, it heals the thing at the same time. We haven't bothered with that yet because it's new. So key 2 is simply target yourself, just do the check. Less than 80%, heal him. Key 3, you do it in who do you think's going to die the quickest. So obviously check the tank first, then check the healer, then check, we put warrior. So target the warrior, and then if he's less than 80%, heal him. Target the DK. If he's less than 80%, heal him. And then finally the rogue. Pretty simple. Obviously, the hpallys don't actually have that much to do, so the macro is real simple. So that's the holy paladin healing. So again, like, we don't claim that what we do is the best way to do it. It's a combination of how much effort you want to put into it to get it working, and whether or not what you want to do will actually work, because it's not that simple as writing one crazy if statement that does all these crazy things, but the macro just breaks. So you can't necessarily do what you think you could do. Only vanilla 1.12 could you do crazy shit with macros. So then we'll just look at our... We already have this open. The config for our multibox client, hotkey.net. So for hotkey.net, you write a config file which sets up all your shortcuts, right? It's simple. There's no, like, you know, ISBox that always these drop down menus and buttons and all this shit. Like, here you can just write it. So what's our thing? So Control R, it's basically hotkey, what the combo is, PC you're sending it to, and then what you're actually doing. So we should write a table of contents for this before we try to share this, because people won't know what it does. But we can just run through it real quick. Control R is set up the windows, so renaming, because when you open 5 lots of World of Warcraft, they all have the same name, so you need to set them to 5 different names. Control T is just an extra button for renaming a single window. Sometimes you close one window and you reopen one window and you want to set it to a specific number. That's just a quick way to do it. Control U, I think that's the same thing. Control G, renaming. Sometimes 2 windows got named the same thing. That's another key to do that. Control Y is set up all the windows on the screen. So it sets the size of the window and the position. So if we just drag all these windows on screen so you can see them, and then we put them all behind there. But you can see we have all the windows open. So when we press... When we press Control Y, it moves all the windows into their position. So if I move this over here, it sets up the other ones, and then Control F sets up this one, and then the windows off screen, if it's in focus, Control F puts it as full screen, and then Control Y puts it back in its position. So that's just that. Let's just open this again. labels, so whenever you write, you have labels for your windows, so whenever you say this label, you mean send it to that. There's hotkey net stuff, so that's our control F. So control F brings whatever window's in focus to this position here where we can see it. So we drag this from off screen, we press control F, it full screens it, control Y puts it back where we have it off screen. So then we have solo DPS. So we use caps lock to toggle broadcasting on and off. So if caps lock is off, we're in solo DPS mode, which means you're only sending keys to the focus window, which is like the tank. Key trigger, whenever you 0 to 2 and 5 to 9, because 3 is always our AoE button. And it's toggling between the trigger, F, and J. This is carryover from TBC when we had, so this is like your, F is like your second macro, J was your third macro. So whenever you press 1, which is like main DPS, it sends 1, then it sends F, then it sends J, and it just spams that to focus window, which is usually the tank or whatever. So when you're spamming 1, it's going 1FJ, 1FJ, 1FJ to the focus window. And then when caps lock is on, that's your broadcasting, so sending it to everything. So 0 to 2, 5 to 9. So when you're spamming 1, we've got toggles. Toggle means the step. So step 1, it sends the trigger key to these labels, so focus 1, 3, and 4. So in our case, this is the tank and the 2 DPS, and then send the trigger key, so whatever you press, but then hard-coded for the priest and for the healer and the DK, they have an order. So the priest goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the priest gets sent 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. Same with the DK. So when you're spamming 1 as DPS or 2 as your lacerate button, for everyone else it's sending 1 or 2, but for the priest it's running a sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's what that is. So when caps lock is on, we're broadcasting, sending the trigger key or that sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to all the windows. For AoE, we have a broadcast AoE, so our AoE's always been 3. So whenever caps lock is on and you press 3, it's broadcast AoE, and in this case, you're sending 3 to all the DPS, but the priest and the DK still have that specific order. So even though you're doing 3, the priest still does 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So toggling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The priest still does his healing rotation. When we had a priest, like an actual priest, we would do the AoE, what's it called, Holy Nova or whatever, when you're doing AoE, because it's damage and heal. But in this case, the pally doesn't have that many buttons. Plus, we're still getting used to because we're not a WoW player, so we don't know heaps of shit. So that's AoE spam. And yeah, then we have an AoE solo, because again, so you make keys for situations that you need. So caps lock off, not broadcasting, pressing 3, send only 3 to the focus window. That's like when you want to start an AoE pack with just the tank and not send keys to anyone else. Then we have some of the stuff we don't even remember because it's been like 5 years since we played. So we had specific buttons for different things. I don't remember what 4 was in this case. It was sending 4 to 2 and 5. Movement, so scroll lock is our send movement to everyone. So like when you're just running around, you can just have everyone follow you. But obviously when you walk to a dungeon, the leader goes in and then there's no one to follow. So that's when you enable scroll lock to send WASD to everyone. So if I enable scroll lock, now everyone gets sent the same move key, so you can walk into a dungeon together. It's just a movement thing, because obviously if you walk into a dungeon, the tank disappears, then you enable scroll and walk forward with everyone. So that's just convenience button. Hotkey T, this was from that one TBC dungeon where you had to stop everyone attacking. So we made a custom key where it was that shadow ghost thing where like if you attack him while he has the shield on it, like T was like a only send keys on the tank and the healer. We made a specific key. That was a fight specific thing. Shift 2, so Shift 2 was send key 9 to everyone, because obviously keys like 6 to 0, 6 to plus, it's hard to accurately press those buttons, so we just make shortcuts. So L Shift 2 was key 9. I don't remember what we had on Shift 2, same with Shift 3, that was 0, Shift 4, key 6, I don't remember what we used those keys for. Alt F, that's just our follow, so Alt F is send period to everyone. Period is the follow macro, if you remember. This key over here, period runs a macro, follow large gay bear. Alt S is key G, which we set to interact with target. Obviously we only just gained interact with target in Wrath legitimately because they added it. In vanilla we found a hack that gave you a scuffed interact with target. That's how we still use melee. So Alt S is send interact with target, in this case to all the melees. So this is how you get the melees to face and move to the right target. Obviously range DPS like mage or lock, you don't need this as long as they're facing in the right way. Alt D, this is send follow to just the melee. So this is like a party specific thing, so we've got everyone on follow. If we press Alt D, only the melee follow, and the priest runs his heal rotation on the tank. We could actually add a toc. We only have him heal the tank because usually, so why would you need this is you need to move the tank and the melees out of range of some AoE and not move the priest. You want the priest to keep doing what he's doing. So technically we should add a toggle so that he cycles through his 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Alt D is a melee only follow for specific party combinations. Alt Q, that was just send some keys. I don't remember what we used that for. Alt W, same thing. I don't remember what that was for. I think some of these were like sheep setups. Alt E. Oh yeah, Alt. No, we used shift. So I don't remember what we used this for. Alt 1. I think that was our triple sheep and fear. No, 8. I think that was a counter spell. So it toggles. So it toggles between everyone's interrupt. We were using Alt 2. Maybe we should use Alt 1. So it's like, you know, you've got counterspell on window 3. So the first time you press it, send it, because you don't want to burn all 3 of your interrupts in one press. So it's like, try it on one character. If it gets interrupted, you don't have to press it again. If the next time you press it, it sends it to a different character. So that's like interrupts. Alt R, another key that just sends a key. I don't remember what we use that for. Alt 3, I don't remember, but that was sending 4. Alt 4, I don't remember what we used it for. Alt 5, these are all like specific. Alt 5 was a priest tank healing button, like a setup, but we're not using a priest. These are more like character specific keys. Control 2, we never used any of these keys, so it doesn't really matter in this specific combination. The Control 2, I don't remember what this was, but it's some like character specific combination. L Shift Q, so this is like a cooldowns let's go, so that sends plus, and we just set plus to it's only really Fury, so that's when you pop Death Wish and Recklessness poggers. So Shift Q is like DPS cooldowns. Shift W was retaliation, but we don't use that back in vanilla. And then Shift E was defensive cooldowns, so that sends frenzied rage. So Shift E in this case does those survival instincts and frenzies regeneration. So that's like panic buttons for everyone. Fuck, accidentally pressed something. Like defensive cooldowns. These, I don't remember what these are. Some of this is left over. And then OEM3 is the tilde key, and this is for broadcasting mouse clicks. So if you need to do something in the UI to all clients, that's how you would do it. But that you don't really need to do that very often. Alt clicks. This was back when we still clicked. Tab S. I don't remember what these are. So going back to the healing thing. So like when we realized you could do fully automatic healing, because obviously if you do like click healing, that's another thing you have to think about, which just makes it harder. Like we're all about, all I have to do is press DPS. I just have to spam 1, and everyone does everything that they need to. When I spam 1, the priest is doing automatic healing, and that's good, right? So we're all about setting it up so it runs itself and you don't have to think about it. And obviously, even back when we were playing through vanilla, we didn't understand how the game works because we never played it. So if we went back and did it now, we could do way better things, because you just learn, right? And even if you know coding, again, there might be a better way to write something, but it might not work. It might just break the macro. So it was only vanilla 1.12 where you could write like nice giant macros that didn't break. But in TBC and Wrath, shit just stops working. So even if it looks scuffed, it's probably scuffed for a reason. But obviously maybe there's better ways to write it. But I'm all about like how quickly you can write it. So obviously we're learning. We never played the game, so there's shitloads of stuff we don't know about. And yeah, so with the healing, you would have to, you're trying to do your DPS rotation, you have to look where you're clicking, you're trying to click on people, it just doesn't work. And obviously the damage is way higher on here than on live classic. Like live classic, you don't even have to, you don't take any damage, right? Whereas on like vanilla sea mango, so you get your ass kicked by everything. So that's just a quick rundown of the macros. Obviously, if you don't know anything about coding, you're going to get lost, but you can always learn it, right? Like coding really isn't that hard, and obviously we just focus on how quickly we go for the easy, like quick setup. I don't claim that this is like the best way to do it or whatever, but so yeah, that's going to be it. So until the next time, goodbye. We'll actually start playing the game and see if we get our ass kicked in the first dungeon and have to re-roll a party with CC. Lol.